I was 24 years old the day love taught me how sharp a promise can cut. It was a sticky June evening in 1969, the kind of Tennessee heat that makes wedding dresses cling to your skin like guilt. I stood in the little white church on Dogwood Lane, barefoot because my new shoes hurt, holding a handful of wild daisies Thomas had picked that morning. He was 26, sunburned from working the tobacco fields, and when he lifted my veil, he whispered the sentence that would haunt me for the next 56 years. Evie, I'm going to love you until the stars burn out. The preacher hadn't even said, "You may kiss the bride" yet, and already I felt something heavy settle on my chest, like the future already knew what we didn't. 3 weeks later, the letter came. I was frying okra when I heard the mailbox creak. Thomas walked up the porch steps holding one thin envelope the color of bone. His face had gone the shade of ash, I knew before he spoke. Selective Service System. Report for induction, August 12, 1969. Destination, Republic of Vietnam. That night we didn't make love, we clung. I counted every rib under his shirt, memorized the exact rhythm of his heartbeat against my cheek because I was suddenly terrified I might forget it. And then 3 weeks after that, I discovered I was pregnant. I didn't tell him right away. I waited until the night before he left, when the crickets were screaming and the suitcase sat open like a mouth. I placed his hand on the still flat place below my navel and whispered, "You're not just leaving me, Thomas Carter, you're leaving us." His eyes filled so fast the tears spilled over before he could blink. He pressed his forehead to mine and made another promise, quieter this time, almost scared. "I will crawl home to you and this baby if I have to crawl through fire." The next morning, the Greyhound bus coughed diesel outside our tiny rented house. Half the town came to wave flags. I stood there in the red dress he loved, hair curled, lipstick perfect, because I didn't want his last memory of me to be tears. But when he kissed me goodbye, he slipped something into my palm. His grandfather's silver dog tag from World War II. "Keep this warm for me, Evie. I'll trade it back for the real one when I come home." The bus pulled away. I smiled until it turned the corner. Then I fell to my knees in the gravel and screamed his name so hard I tasted blood. The letters started coming almost every day at first. Smudged ink, words of love written between mortar rounds. "I held a boy today who won't see 19. Tell our baby I'm fighting for his tomorrow. I dream about your cornbread and the way you laugh in your sleep." I counted. Only 312 days left. Then the letters slowed, then they stopped. March 17, 1975. I was 30 weeks pregnant and swollen like a summer peach when the knock came. Two soldiers in dress greens, hats in their hands, faces practiced in sorrow. "Ma'am, we regret to inform you," the world went silent. I don't remember dropping the glass of sweet tea. I only remember clutching my belly while the room spun and thinking, he promised. He promised he would crawl through fire. They said his platoon was ambushed near the Cambodian border. No body recovered. Status, missing in action, presumed killed. I gave birth to Matthew Thomas Carter on April 29, 1975, the same week Saigon fell. He came out screaming, red-faced, perfect, with his daddy's crooked smile. I wrapped him in the only thing I had left of Thomas, the shirt he wore the day he left, and while the nurse cleaned the afterbirth, I pressed those silver dog tags into my newborn son's tiny fist and whispered the lie I would tell myself for the next 50 years. "Daddy's coming home, baby. He's just taking the long way." But deep in my heart, something else whispered louder. What if the stars already burned out and he never knew? I stood in the kitchen holding my screaming newborn, the dog tags still warm from his tiny fist, and I made a decision I would keep for the rest of my life. I would wait. They told me to declare him dead. The army, the preacher, even my own mama, gently at first, then firmly. "Evelyn, honey, you've got to let the government bury him proper. Matthew needs a birth certificate that doesn't say father unknown." So on a gray October morning in 1975, 6 months after Saigon fell, I put on the same black dress I wore to my daddy's funeral and walked to the little cemetery behind Dogwood Baptist. There was a flag-draped casket, shining and new, but it was empty. Not a single bone of Thomas Carter lay inside, only a folded uniform, his purple heart, and the wedding photo. The honor guard fired 3 volleys that made me jump even though I knew they were coming. Taps played. The young soldier handed me the triangle-folded flag and said the words they teach them in school. On behalf of a grateful nation, I wanted to spit in his face. Grateful for what? For giving me a lifetime of empty coffee cups and a son who would never know his father's arms. That night I laid Matthew in the crib Thomas had built before he left, wood still smelling of fresh pine, and I did something crazy. I set 2 cups on the table, one for me, one for Thomas. I poured coffee into both. And I talked to the empty chair like he was sitting there listening. Every single morning for the next 49 years, I did the same thing, even when the cups cracked, even when the coffee got cold. Even when Matthew grew up watching his mama talk to a ghost. By the time he was 5, he asked, "Mama, why do you pour Daddy's coffee if he's in heaven?" I told him, because your daddy's not in heaven yet, baby. He's just lost. And lost people get thirsty. People who are waiting get thirsty too. The town started calling me poor Evelyn, the widow who wouldn't let go. I didn't care. I wore my grief like armor. Every Sunday after church, I walked to the white headstone that read, Thomas James Carter, 1943-1975, beloved husband and father, Vietnam. I brought fresh daisies in summer, pine boughs in winter. I told that stone everything, how Matthew lost his first tooth, how he started school, how he looked exactly like Thomas when he laughed, and every single visit I ended the same way. I pressed my lips to the cold marble and whispered, you promised you'd crawl through fire. I'm still here. I'm still waiting. Years rolled by like thunder in the distance. Matthew graduated high school in 1993. He joined the army himself, God help me, and came home safe, thank the Lord. He married a sweet girl named Sarah in 2001. They gave me 2 beautiful grandbabies. But every holiday, every birthday, every Christmas morning, there was still an empty chair at my table, still 2 cups of coffee. People stopped asking me to date, stopped trying to set me up with nice widowers from church. They finally understood. Evelyn Carter had already given her heart away in 1969, and no power on earth was getting it back. In 2010, when I turned 65, Matthew tried one last time. Mama, you're still young, you could travel. You could, I touched his cheek and smiled. Son, the only place I ever wanted to go was home to your daddy, and I'm still on that road. By 2020, the doctor told me my heart was wearing out. Congestive heart failure, they said. Nothing to do but take pills and wait. Matthew moved me into Pleasant Valley Nursing Home in January 2025, room 217, a window that looked out on dogwood trees, just like the Lord's sense of humor. I brought 3 things with me: the flag from the empty casket, Thomas's old dog tag, and the cracked coffee cup I had poured his coffee into every morning for almost 50 years. On the night table, I set 2 cups again. The nurses thought it was sweet. They didn't know it was a vow. February came in cold and quiet. My legs swelled. My breath grew shorter. The doctor pulled Matthew aside and said, days to weeks, maybe less. I wasn't afraid. I was tired. And for the first time in 50 years, I was ready. I closed my eyes on February 13, 2025, thinking, maybe tonight the road finally ends. Maybe tonight I'll feel his arms again. But the story wasn't finished with me yet. Because the very next morning, Valentine's Day, there was a knock on room 217, and the voice that answered wasn't a nurse's. It was a voice cracked with age, but it said my name the way only one man ever had. Evie, my little Evie, I'm home. I thought I had already cried every tear a body could hold. Turns out I was wrong. When that cracked, old man voice said, Evie, my little Evie, I'm home. Something inside my chest snapped like a frozen branch. I forced my eyes open. A man sat in the wheelchair beside my bed, white hair thin as smoke, skin like crumpled paper, hands trembling on the blanket. He was 91 if he was a day. But those eyes, Lord have mercy, those were Thomas's eyes, the exact cornflower blue that used to make my knees weak in 1969. I tried to speak. Nothing came out except a rasp. He reached out one shaking hand and touched the silver dog tag that still hung around my neck, the one I had worn every single day since 1975. His fingers closed around it the same way they had the morning he left. I told you I'd trade it back, he whispered, voice breaking. I'm so late, Evie. The nurse in the doorway was crying. Matthew stood behind her, mouth open, staring like he was seeing a ghost. I finally found my voice. It came out small and sharp like a child's. Thomas, just that one word, 50 years of waiting inside it, he nodded. Tears rolled down the deep trenches of his cheeks. I never died, darlin'. I just lost my way home. And then he did something that broke the last piece of me that was still whole. He lifted my hand, turned it palm up, and placed something in it. My wedding ring. The same thin gold band I had slipped onto his finger in 1969, the one the army said was lost in the jungle. The one I had replaced with a cheap one after the funeral because I couldn't bear an empty finger. He had kept it, all this time. I stared at it shining in my wrinkled palm, and the dam finally burst. I sobbed like I was 30 again, standing in that gravel watching his bust disappear. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead to mine, and let me cry into his neck that smelled of hospital soap and something older, something like jungle rain and gunpowder and lost decades. When I could breathe again, I pulled back just far enough to look at him. Really look. The boy I married was gone. This was an old, old man. But under the aged spots and the trembling lips, I saw him, my Thomas, the one who used to carry me across mud puddles and promise me the moon. I touched his face with fingers that didn't feel like my own. How? I croaked. The telegram, the casket, they said no body, but they said you were gone. He closed his eyes like the memory still cut him. I'm gonna tell you everything, Evie, but not here, not with machines beeping and people watching, just you and me like it's supposed to be. He turned to the nurse, suddenly fierce. Can my wife and I have the room, please? My wife. He said it like no time had passed at all. They closed the door. Matthew stayed outside, giving us the only thing he could, privacy. Thomas took both my hands, kissed every knuckle, then started talking in that same slow Tennessee drawl I had replayed in dreams for half a century. And what he told me next rewrote every day of the last 50 years. Thomas squeezed my hands so hard his knuckles went white. His eyes, those impossible blue eyes, filled again. Evie, what I'm about to tell you is gonna hurt worse than the day they told you I was dead. But you deserve every word. He took a shaky breath. March 17, 1975, we were on patrol near the Parrot's Beak, Cambodian border. Ambush came fast, half the platoon gone in the first 30 seconds. I took shrapnel in the leg, couldn't run. The last thing I remember is reaching for my grenade, then blackness. He stopped, swallowed hard. When I woke up, I was in a bamboo cage, Viet Cong. They kept the ones they thought had value. Officers, radio men, me, because I carried the map case. His voice dropped to almost nothing. They moved us north, year after year, hoeing rice, digging tunnels, eating bugs to stay alive. Every night they asked the same question. We're American bases. Every night I said I didn't know. So every night they took something from me, a tooth, a fingernail, a piece of hope. A tear slid off his chin onto our joined hands. In 1981, the camp got overrun by Khmer Rouge. Most prisoners shot on the spot. I crawled out through the bodies, half dead, no name, no memory. The explosion that knocked me out in 75 had done something to my brain. Doctors later called it traumatic amnesia. I knew how to walk, how to eat, but I couldn't remember my own name, my home, or you. He looked at me like he was begging me to forgive him for forgetting. A Catholic mission in Thailand found me, gave me the name John Doe number 47. I worked in their orphanage for 30 years, fixing roofs, teaching the children English with the few words I still knew. I wore this ring on a string around my neck every single day and never knew why it hurt to look at it. He lifted the gold band he had just placed in my palm. 6 months ago, one of the old nuns died. They were cleaning her room and found a box of yellowed newspapers she'd saved from 1975. American MIAs. My picture was on the front page. Specialist Thomas J. Carter, age 26, presumed KIA. Underneath, in tiny print, leaves behind wife Evelyn expecting first child. His voice cracked wide open. The second I saw your face, Evie, everything came back like a dam breaking. The church, the red dress, the dog tags, the promise I made the night before I left. All of it. I screamed so loud the children thought I was dying. He was crying openly now, shoulders shaking like a little boy. I was 81 years old and I remembered I had a wife, a son I'd never met, 50 years stolen. I couldn't speak. My heart was too busy breaking and healing at the same time. I sold everything I owned, every chair I'd carved, every shirt I owned to buy a plane ticket. I landed in Nashville 3 weeks ago with nothing but this ring and the address of the only Evelyn Carter in the telephone book. They told me you were here, that you were slipping away. He pressed his forehead to mine again. I ran down these hallways in bedroom slippers, begging every nurse, please, don't let my Evie die before I can tell her I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't crawl through fire fast enough. I finally found my voice. Thomas Carter, you listened to me. I cupped his wet face with both hands. You did crawl through fire, 50 years of it, and you're here now, that's all that matters. He let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. I love you, Evie. I never stopped, not 1 second. I pulled him as close as my weak arms could manage, and I never took your coffee cup off the table, not once. We stayed like that, forehead to forehead, breathing the same air for the first time since 1969, while outside the window the dogwood trees dropped pink petals like confetti for a wedding 56 years late. But our story still had 3 days left, 3 perfect, borrowed days, and the most beautiful goodbye the world has ever seen. The nurses tried to separate us that first night. Thomas looked at the head nurse with the same stubborn fire he had at 26 and said, "Ma'am, I have missed 50 years of putting my wife to sleep. You can move another bed in here, or you can call security, but I am not leaving this room again until one of us meets Jesus, and I'm praying it's at the exact same second." They moved a second bed in. Then when they saw how we couldn't bear even 6 inches of space, they pushed the beds together and locked the wheels. For the first time since 20,440 nights, I fell asleep with Thomas's arm around me. His heartbeat under my ear was slower, now thinner, but it was still the same drum that had rocked me to sleep in 1969. We had 72 hours, hour 112. Talking until our voices gave out, we didn't waste a minute on small things. We spoke the sentences we had saved for half a century. He wanted to know what Matthew's first word was. Dada, I told him and watched fresh tears roll. I wanted to know if he ever dreamed of me in the jungle. Every night, he said, you were always standing in that red dress, holding a baby I couldn't reach. He asked if I ever kissed another man. I laughed through tears and said, Thomas Carter, the only lips that have touched mine since yours are our grandbaby's sticky ones. He told me about the orphanage children calling him Grandpa John, how he carved wooden toys exactly like the ones he planned to carve for our son, never knowing why his hands remembered what his mind had forgotten. Hour 1336, remembering out loud, we went through every memory after memory like unwrapping fragile Christmas ornaments. He sang me our wedding song, voice cracked and trembling, "You are my sunshine," the same way he did under the oak tree the night he proposed. I cried so hard the heart monitor started beeping wild. I told him how I danced with his ghost in the kitchen every anniversary, how the floorboards still remember his boots. He closed his eyes and smiled like he could see it. He asked me to describe Matthew's face the day he was born. I did every detail, every wrinkle, every tiny finger. Thomas kept whispering, "That's my boy, that's my boy." Hour 3760. The questions we were afraid to ask at 3 a.m. on the second night, when the hallway was dark and quiet, I finally whispered the one that had poisoned 50 years. Did you ever love anyone else, even a little? To survive, he turned my face to his, eyes fierce even in the dim light. "Evie, there was only ever you. In the cage, when they beat me, I said your name instead of screaming. When I forgot my own mother's face, I could still see yours. You were the only woman in the entire world for me, and the cruelest thing they ever did was steal the years I should have spent proving it." Then he asked the question that hurt him more. "Did you stop waiting?" Even for one day, I pressed his hand over my heart. "Feel how tired it is. It's tired because it never once stopped running toward you." Hour 6170. Practical, beautiful things we called Matthew and Sarah in. Told them everything. Matthew, 49 years old, big, strong soldier turned carpenter, fell into his father's arms like he was 5 and cried, "Daddy." Thomas held his son for the first time and kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so proud, I love you, I'm sorry." We signed papers making Thomas my husband again, legally, because the nurse, who was a notary public, cried the whole time. He asked for a tiny cup of black coffee, no sugar, just like old times. I held it to his lips with shaking hands. He smiled and said, "Still the best coffee in Tennessee." Hour 7172. The quiet before the sunrise on the third night, the pain in my chest grew heavy, like someone was sitting on it. Thomas knew. He always knew. He climbed fully into my narrow bed, careful of the IV lines, pulled me against his chest the way he did when we were young and the world was simple. He started humming our song again, softer now. I felt his lips in my hair. "I'm not scared, Evie. I've been gone too long. I just want to go home with you," I whispered back. "Then let's go together." He reached for my left hand, slid the original wedding ring, the one he carried through hell, back onto my finger where it belonged. Then he put his matching one on too. We laced our fingers so tight I felt the bones creak. I looked up at him one last time. His eyes were already closing, peaceful. Thomas smiled the same crooked smile from 1969 and said the last words I ever heard on this earth. "I told you I'd crawl through fire, little Evie, and I finally made it home." The morning of February 17, 2025, came in quiet and pale gold through the dogwood branches outside room 217. Thomas and I were still curled together in the narrow hospital bed, exactly as we had fallen asleep. His arm under my neck, my head on his chest, our wedding rings pressed between our palms like a secret we had kept since 1969. The heart monitor had been beeping slower, slower, slower all night. At 6:42 a.m., the nurse stepped in to check my vitals. She stopped in the doorway, hand over her mouth, because she knew. My breathing had changed. It was shallow, soft, like a child sleeping after crying too long. Thomas stirred. He didn't open his eyes, but he tightened his arm around me the way he used to when thunder scared me. He whispered, so low only I could hear, "It's time, Evie. Let's go dance where there's no more leaving." I felt his lips brush my forehead one last time. At 6:47 a.m., my heart gave its final tired beat against his ribs. 7 minutes later, at 6:54 a.m., his followed mine. The nurse said later that the two lines on the monitor flattened almost together, like two birds flying off at the same moment. Matthew arrived 20 minutes too late. He fell to his knees beside the bed, sobbing, but even through his tears he smiled, because he had never seen his parents look so peaceful. Thomas's hand was still laced through mine. Our wedding rings, the original ones, the ones that had traveled through war, cages, amnesia, oceans, and 50 lost years, were tied together with the faded red ribbon from my bridal bouquet that I had kept in a drawer all this time. The ribbon had never been used until that morning. Matthew found a small note in Thomas's shirt pocket, written in shaky handwriting the night before. "If we go together, tie our rings with the ribbon Evie carried in 1969. Tell the world some love stories don't end. They just wait 50 years to finish the last dance. Love, Thomas and Evelyn Carter, finally home." The funeral was 1 week later, one casket, two names on the stone. Thomas James Carter 1943, 2025, EVELYN, MAE Carter 1945, 2025, together at last. They buried us under the big oak where Thomas proposed, the same tree that shaded our wedding pictures. Matthew placed 2 coffee cups on the casket before they lowered it. One for Dad, one for Mom, both finally full, both finally warm. And on quiet Tennessee mornings, people walking past the cemetery swear they hear faint music drifting from that grave, an old crackly recording of You Are My Sunshine. And sometimes, if the wind is just right, they hear soft laughter, the sound of bare feet dancing on grass that hasn't been there since 1969. Because some promises don't break, some roads don't end, some loves don't die, they just take the long way home. And on February 17, 2025, after 50 years, 7 days, and 7 minutes apart, Thomas James Carter finally kept his promise. He crawled through fire and he brought me with him into forever. Thank you for listening to our story. If it touched your heart, share it with someone you would wait 50 years for. This is Evelyn Carter, signing off with the only man I ever loved for good this time. Good night, my darlings, and remember, real love always finds its way home.